All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another deep dive. If you're prepping for the UPSC, especially the international relations optional political philosophy is, well, it's basically required reading. And today we're tackling one of the all-time greats, Thomas Hobbes and his masterpiece, Leviathan.
Yeah, Leviathan, it's a 17th century text, but it's wild how relevant it still feels today. I mean, Hobbes was grappling with issues that are, well, they're like the foundation of international relations, sovereignty, the nature of power, and of course the big one, why should we obey any government in the first place?
Right, like why these are not just theoretical questions. They're concepts you absolutely need to understand for your IR optional. Leviathan can be dense, though.
Yeah.
So today we're gonna do more than just summarize what Hobbes said.
Yeah.
We're gonna look at how different scholars have interpreted his ideas, especially when it comes to political obligation and gender. Always a fun one.
Absolutely. You'll see a whole range of opinions, different perspectives, and we'll show you how to analyze and compare them. That's the kind of critical thinking that, that UPSC examiners really look for.
Okay, so let's jump right in. This whole idea of political obligation, it might sound kind of academic, but it's really the core of political order.
Yeah.
Why should citizens obey a ruler?
Right.
Is it because they're afraid out of some sense of duty? Or is there something else going on?
Well, you got to remember, Hobbes was writing during a pretty chaotic time in England, civil war, a king executed. So he was really trying to figure out, like, how do you create a stable society when human nature itself seems so prone to, to conflict?
Right. So Hobbes had a pretty, I guess you could say, a pretty dim view of human nature. He saw people as being inherently selfish, power hungry,
Yeah.
afraid of death.
Yeah,
Not exactly sunshine and rainbows. Yeah. So how do you create order in a world where everyone's just looking out for themselves? That's where the Leviathan comes in, right?
Yeah.
This all-powerful sovereign who can lay down the law. But the question is, why should anyone obey this Leviathan? And, we've got a whole bunch of different interpretations on that.
Yeah, there's a whole spectrum of thought.
Each one gives us a different angle on this idea of political obligation.
One view, it's often associated with scholars like Strauss. It focuses on, fear and punishment. You obey the sovereign because you don't want to face the consequences. It's kind of a do what I say or else approach to government.
So pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Obey or face the music. But does that really hold up, in the context of modern democracy? I mean, individual rights, consent, those are pretty central ideas in international relations today.
Good point. And Hobbes actually offers a different perspective as well with the social contract theory.
Right, the social contract. That's a big one.
Yeah. It suggests that individuals, realizing that a lawless existence is kind of dangerous, they voluntarily agree to give up some freedoms in exchange for security, in the order that the Leviathan provides. It's like a trade-off. You give a little liberty to get a lot more peace of mind.
Okay, so you obey because you agreed to it, you made a deal. But is it purely practical? I mean, some people argue that there's a moral dimension to this, right? That political obligation is about doing the right thing, not just avoiding punishment.
Right, and that's where interpretations from, scholars like Taylor and Warrender come in. They link obedience to natural law, that concept that some thinkers, even Hobbes, linked to divine will. So you obey because it's morally right. It's a duty, not just a strategic move.
Okay, UPSC folks, listen up. This is great essay material right here, comparing different justifications for state authority: fear, self-interest, moral duty. But there's even more, isn't there?
Yeah, there's more. We've also got the view put forward by Oakeshott, which, it's kind of like a blend. It suggests that political obligation is this mix of things: moral duty, rational self-interest, and recognizing the sovereign's legitimacy. It acknowledges that humans aren't one-dimensional. We're motivated by a lot of different factors.
Right. It's like, I obey because I don't want to get punished, but also because I value order and believe in following the rules. I mean, that's just being a good citizen.
Right? Exactly. And for you, UPSC aspirants, this is key. Being able to, analyze and compare these different and sometimes kind of complex interpretations of political thought. That's what will help you stand out on those exams. Don't just settle for one viewpoint. Explore the richness of the debate. Really dig in.
Okay, so we've seen how Hobbes tackled the why of obedience.
Yeah.
But now things get a little more, I guess you could say, a little more interesting. Hobbes had some pretty radical, especially for his time, views on gender,
Oh, yeah.
ready to have some assumptions challenged.
So one of the things that might surprise you when you read Leviathan is that Hobbes actually says that that in the state of nature, that hypothetical time before government and all that, it's mothers, not fathers, who have the primary authority over children.
Hold on, really? That's not what I would expect from a guy writing in the 1600s. What was his thinking there?
Well, Hobbes believed that all legitimate authority comes from consent. So in the case of a mother and a child, the child's consent is kind of implied.
Yeah.
It comes from the act of being born and being totally dependent on the mother for survival. The mother gives birth, so she earns the right to govern the child.
Interesting. So it's not about some kind of natural superiority of women, but about the child's dependence on the mother. That's well, it's a pretty revolutionary way of looking at things, especially back then.
Exactly. And this whole idea of consent as the basis of authority, it carries over into how Hobbes views the family itself. He saw a family, kind of like the state, as a social contract. It's not just, a natural hierarchy based on gender.
Okay, so if Hobbes believed in the basic equality of men and women, at least in the state of nature, and he saw family as a contract based on consent, you'd think he'd be all for shared authority within the family, right?
Yeah, you would think so, wouldn't you? But here's the catch. Despite all these seemingly egalitarian ideas, Hobbes ends up giving fathers exclusive authority within the family once you move from that state of nature into civil society.
Wow. Okay, that's a bit of a head scratcher. Why the sudden change? It seems like he's going against his own principles.
It's something scholars have debated for centuries, really. One explanation might be that Hobbes, always the pragmatist, was worried about potential conflict. I mean, if men and women were constantly battling for control, that would disrupt the stability of the state, right?
Mhm.
And remember, his whole goal was to figure out how to create a society that was free from chaos.
Ah, I see. So maybe he thought that by giving fathers the final say, that would that would reduce the chances of disagreements within the family turning into something that threatened the social order.
Yeah.
Like keep it simple, avoid a power struggle in every household.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Another interpretation is that, well, even though Hobbes had some pretty radical ideas, he was still a product of his time. He couldn't totally escape those deeply ingrained patriarchal norms of 17th century England.
Right. It's like progress isn't always a straight line. Even the most forward-thinking people can be influenced by the social norms of their time. But this contradiction in Hobbes's thought, that's actually a good thing for you UPSC folks.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is the kind of nuanced analysis that will make your exam answers shine. Don't just accept Hobbes's ideas at face value. Dig deeper. Look for the contradictions, consider the historical context, all that good stuff.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time on the theoretical stuff, but you might be thinking, okay, this is all very interesting, but how does any of this apply to international relations in the 21st century? Well, that's where Hobbes's enduring legacy comes in. His ideas are, they're like the building blocks of how we think about countries interacting on the world stage.
Exactly. Think about it. State sovereignty, the balance between individual liberty and security, the role of power in global politics, all those themes. Hobbes was already wrestling with them back in the 17th century.
So by understanding Hobbes, we're not just learning about some old book. We're getting a crash course in the history of political thought that underpins a lot of what we see happening in international relations today.
Right. And as future IR experts, being able to connect these historical ideas to current events, that's super important. You might be asked to analyze a modern conflict through the lens of Hobbesian theory.
Or you might need to, evaluate the effectiveness of something like the UN based on Hobbes's ideas about power and sovereignty.
Exactly. It's all about making those connections and showing that you have a deep understanding of how the past shapes the present. And Hobbes's ideas aren't just relevant to history; they're actually surprisingly applicable to the world we live in today.
It's like he was almost like a political fortune teller.
Yeah, kind of.
Some of the main challenges he identified, they're still playing out on the global stage.
Absolutely. Think about the debates about global governance. The tension between national sovereignty and international cooperation, even the rise of new technologies that are changing, traditional ideas about power and security. These are all issues that, they resonate with the things Hobbes was talking about in Leviathan.
Okay, so let's get into specifics.
Yeah.
Our sources point to a few areas where Hobbes' ideas are particularly relevant today.
One is the concept of the security dilemma. Hobbes argued that in a world without a global sovereign, states are constantly driven by fear of each other. So that leads to an arms race and this never-ending cycle of distrust. Each country is trying to protect itself, but they just end up making everyone else feel less secure, and the cycle keeps going.
It's like everyone's suspicious of everyone else, so they keep building up their weapons, which makes everyone even more suspicious. It's a vicious cycle, and we see this happening all the time in international relations, don't we?
Oh yeah, all the time. The tension between major powers, nuclear proliferation, the militarization of cyberspace. It's a reminder that even though things have changed a lot since Hobbes's time, a lot of the fundamental challenges of international relations haven't really gone away.
Another area where Hobbes is relevant is in economic and political theory. His focus on individuals acting out of self-interest, well, that's been really influential, especially in the development of free market economics.
Right. The idea is that a free market where everyone is pursuing their own rational self-interest can actually lead to greater prosperity for everyone. Of course, there are people who disagree with that, but there's no denying that Hobbes's idea about human nature and self-interest still shape economic policies and political discussions today.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about political obligation, Hobbes' views on gender, and we've connected his ideas to contemporary IR issues, always keeping in mind how this can help you, will help you with your UPSC prep. But before we go, I've got one final thought-provoking question for our listeners, something to really get you thinking. So if Hobbes were around today, how do you think he'd view this whole concept of global governance? Like, would he see organizations like the UN or the International Criminal Court as steps toward a more peaceful world? Or would he be skeptical? Can they really enforce order when states still have ultimate sovereignty?
That's a really good question, and it makes you apply these old ideas to our modern world, right?
Yeah.
Which is a lot more complex. My guess is Hobbes would have a pretty nuanced view of global governance. Remember, he was always suspicious of any system that relied on states voluntarily giving up their power. He really believed that in the end, power trumps good intentions.
So he might look at these international organizations and think, well-meaning, but ultimately kind of toothless. Like, they can talk about cooperation, human rights, all that. But if a powerful country decides to break the rules, can they really do anything to stop them?
No.
I mean, we've seen that happen.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. But Hobbes was also, a pragmatist. He understood that even in a world where states are looking out for themselves, there has to be, some way to avoid total war. So he might see these organizations as as a way to maybe not eliminate conflict, but at least manage it. Maybe they can't force countries to be ethical, but they can create consequences for bad behavior, hopefully encourage some cooperation.
Right. It's like checks and balances, but on a global scale. It's not perfect, but maybe it's the best we can do when states ultimately act in their own self-interest. And this whole idea of the limitations of global governance, with sovereign states and all that. That's really important for your UPSC prep. Make sure you can explain those arguments and have some examples to back them up.
Absolutely. Understanding these tensions and where these debates come from historically, that's essential for anyone who wants to work in international relations. Hobbes gives us a way to think about these challenges even centuries later.
All right, so there you have it. Another deep dive completed. We've tackled Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan, all that good stuff, political obligation, gender, and we connected it all to modern IR. And of course, we kept in mind how this can help you on your UPSC journey.
And for all you UPSC aspirants out there, remember this is just the start. You can keep coming back to Leviathan every time you read it. You'll find something new. Keep asking questions, keep analyzing, and connect these ideas to current events.
Exactly. That ability to think critically about political philosophy, that's a skill that'll help you throughout your UPSC prep and even beyond, whether you're writing essays, analyzing case studies, or maybe one day shaping international policy yourself.
And before we sign off, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the deep dive. We've got more more explorations of political theory and current events coming up. We're here to help you make sense of the world and ace those UPSC exams.
Keep those minds sharp and those ambitions high. We'll be back soon with another deep dive. Until then, happy studying.